This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the L.A.B room.
Exclusive.
The market.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the program. Day one of free agency, better known as, to me, the market. And so, just going to give you quickly the rules and parameters of this thing we love to call free agency. Caveat emptor. Pretty simple. In layman's terms, buyer beware. Check your stuff. In the market, there are no, and I repeat, no receipts. All sales are final. So whether you get something lazy, like an Albert Hainsworth, something injury prone, like Javon Walker was for the Raiders years ago, something that just isn't really good, like the San Diego Chargers found out last year with Derek Cox, there are no returns, no refunds, no exchanges. All sales are final here at the market. So be careful. Make sure you check your merchandise before you hit the checkout counter. So, with that, let's hit the market. Let's do some shopping. Opening day of free agency. So let's look around the league and I'll quickly go through these teams, run through the first day of action in free agency. You know, a lot happens in the first 2 days. Most of the big fish come off the board, and then we kind of settle in and you start getting the bargain basement deals. That's when you start finding the pink tags and the guys that are going to come a lot cheaper. But here's a lot of the big name guys coming off the board early. We start in Tampa Bay. And one of the biggest free agent commodities, Michael Johnson, lands in Tampa Bay. 5 years, $43 million. Huge deal for Johnson, coming over from Cincinnati. Had a down year last year, doesn't matter. He's in Tampa Bay now, looking to do some big things along that defensive line. Buccaneers also land Alteron Werner, a sought-after free agent corner out of Tennessee. 4 years, $26.5 million. So you're talking about a deal that's a little less than $7 million per. A really good, economically sound deal for the Buccaneers. They won here because I thought Alteron Werner could have commanded more money on the free agent market than that. So that's a win for the Buccaneers. And they also were able to land defensive tackle free agent out of Seattle, Clinton McDonald. So that's another guy that the Buccaneers were able to corral. And other guys visiting the Buccaneers right now, Josh McCown is in the Bucs facility. I don't know if he's going to sign with them or not. He's got a couple of teams lined up on the docket. Buccaneers happen to be first. Anthony Collins, a left tackle that's a swing tackle in this league, can play right, can play left, out of Cincinnati. He's also visiting the Bucs. And Evan Dietrich Smith, Green Bay Packers center / guard, very versatile guy that Aaron Rodgers wants back in Green Bay. He's visiting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so that could be a huge loss for the Packers if he were to depart. So that's what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were able to get done in day one. Not bad at all for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization. You look at the Miami Dolphins. Went out, made a big splash. Worst offensive line in terms of protecting the quarterback in 2013. A huge part of that, musical chairs at the left tackle position. That was solved by going out and giving out the biggest contract to any offensive lineman in the 2014 free agency class, that being Brendan Albert, 5 years, $46 million. So you're talking about a shade over $9 million per for Brendan Albert. That's a great number for him. Great deal for the Dolphins. They get a rock at the left tackle position and solidify that offensive line. The New York Jets have reached a long-term agreement with Nick Folk. If you remember, Nick Folk was slapped with the franchise tag. Now that number comes down significantly because they've reached a long-term deal with Nick Folk. Chicago Bears have reached a 1-year deal with DJ Williams, linebacker. He'll be back in Chicago. But here's the big fish for the Chicago Bears. They were looking to upgrade that defensive end position. Did not get a lot of production out of their defensive line, especially the defensive ends. Entering Lamar Houston, 5 years, $35 million. We're talking 7 per from the Oakland Raiders. And we'll talk about the Raiders a little bit later, but that's a huge move for the Chicago Bears, really trying to solidify that defensive end position. A guy like Lamar Houston that's extremely versatile, can stop the run and get after the passer a little bit. Big move for the Bears. Atlanta Falcons, extremely aggressive, much like Tampa Bay, extremely aggressive in day one of free agency. Paul Soliai, ex-Miami Dolphin, 5 years, $33 million to solidify the middle of that defense. Falcons have been soft up the middle for years. They're looking to get tougher. Their GM, Thomas Dimitrov, made it a point of emphasis that we want to get tougher. We want to be stouter at the point of attack. We can't allow teams to push us around. We've got to be tougher as a football team. Guys like Paul Soliai and Tyson Jackson from Kansas City, 5 years, $25 million, will help solidify the middle of this defense, help them stop the run, and potentially get pressure on the quarterback as well. Jonathan Babineau, 3 years, $9 million, is returning to this Falcons team. He has been the lone bright spot at the defensive tackle position for this Atlanta Falcons team over the last 4 or 5 seasons. He's probably been the most consistent defender in the middle of that defense. He's going to be back. Falcons also add John Asamoah out of Kansas City. One of the most highly sought after guards in this free agent market is now going to be an Atlanta Falcons. So Falcons making some power moves in day one, looking to upgrade this roster. They don't like that taste that they had in their mouth at the end of 2013 with the poorest record that they had. They're looking to improve this team, and they're looking to do it in the trenches, offensively and defensively on those respective lines. You look at the Indianapolis Colts. You want to talk about a busy football team? Look no further than the Indianapolis Colts. For the second year in a row, Colts have been major players in the first 2 days of free agency. Arthur Jones, 5 years, $33 million. Huge acquisition. Makes a lot of sense. Head coach Chuck Pagano coached Arthur Jones in Baltimore. So the connection, easy to see. And this guy is going to immediately upgrade the defensive line in Indianapolis. This guy is stout at the point of attack, is an excellent run defender, and also can get occasional pressure on the quarterback. He immediately upgrades the defensive end position for this Indianapolis Colts team. Vontae Davis, 4 years, $39 million, similar to the Sam Shields deal in Green Bay. You're talking about a shade under 10 mil per for a guy that I think is one of the better man-to-man cover corners in the National Football League. He's back in Indianapolis. Great move by the Colts to bring their stuff back. You look at another guy, Adam Vinatieri, Ahmad Bradshaw, and Sergio Brown, and go ahead and throw Pat McAfee, punter, all in the mix. All of those guys returning to this Colts team after being on this team a season ago. Sergio Brown, safety, will be back. Ahmad Bradshaw was playing stellar football until he got injured. He's coming back, which spelled trouble for Donald Brown. He's out. We'll talk about where he ended up landing. And Pat McAfee, a guy that the Colts franchised last season, gets a long-term deal, signs up with the Colts. Adam Vinatieri signs a 2-year deal to remain a Colt as well. And for those of you who didn't know, prior to free agency, DeQuell Jackson signed a 4-year, $22 million deal with this team, coming over from Cleveland to help solidify the middle of this defense at the linebacker position. So Colts got better defensively in the first day of free agency. You look at the Washington Redskins, another busy football team in the first day of free agency, bringing back their stuff. Perry Riley Jr., 3 years, $13 million. Good economical deal for the Redskins. Perry Riley Jr., a key cog in the middle of that defense at the linebacker position. Great to have him back. Andre Roberts, 4 years, $16 million. Receiver coming over from the Arizona Cardinals, going to help try to solidify the receiver position for this Redskins football team. 4 years, $16 million. So you're looking at $4 million per, solid deal for all parties involved. Adam Hayward, special teams guy from Tampa Bay. Redskins had huge amounts of trouble with special teams, one of the worst special teams units in the National Football League. Go out, get Adam Hayward, trying to solidify their special teams unit. Santana Moss back on a 1-year deal. I thought when the Redskins went out and got Andre Roberts, that was going to spell the end of Santana Moss in Washington. Proved not to be the case. Santana Moss back on a 1-year deal, back in Washington. You look at Sean Laval. This is a move that many of us did not see coming. 4 years, $17 million for Sean Laval. You're talking about a little over 4 per year. And here's a guy that was a really good guard on a really good Cleveland Browns offensive line. He can at times struggle in the run game, but is an excellent pass protector, and he's going to come in, fit right in Washington, and help them solidify that offensive line, especially the interior and that right side of that offensive line. He's going to come in. They're going to look to plug him in at the right guard position. Corey Graham and Antonio Smith, both visits that the Redskins have scheduled. Antonio Smith, last checked, he was at the Redskins facility, so he could be a guy that the Redskins could be signing up. That would be a huge move to help improve that 3-4 defense at that 5 technique position. Antonio Smith would be a great get for the Redskins. So those are guys that you check out. And Corey Graham, ex-Ravens corner, could be another guy the Redskins target. He's supposed to have a visit in Washington here shortly. So you move on to the Baltimore Ravens. Eugene Monroe, 5-year, $37.5 million deal. I felt like it was a no-brainer. You give up mid-level picks for him last year in the middle of the season to get him. You don't want to allow those picks to go to waste. And he played well for you. You like what you saw out of him. And he comes in, solidifies the left side of that line at left tackle, which is a premium position in this league. You cannot let this guy walk. They were able to strike a deal. He's going to remain a Baltimore Raven. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Malcolm Jenkins, 3 years, $15 million deal. You're talking about 5 per. Look, the Eagles have had struggles at the safety position. It's no secret. They need to shore that position up if they want to take the next step defensively. That guy in Malcolm Jenkins can help them do that. He's had some struggles in pass coverage, but again, I think if he's on the right defense and a good fit, he can play defense in the secondary. I think that's an upgrade for the Philadelphia Eagles. You look at the New York Giants. Here's a team that was extremely busy in day one as well, and they needed to be busy. This was a team that lacked a lot of talent in the 2013 season, and so Stevie Brown is a guy that had an injury. Giants are hoping that he is going to return to the form that saw him make the Pro Bowl and pick 8 passes off in 2012. So they essentially want him to prove that he's healthy. 1-year prove-it deal for Stevie Brown to return to the Giants in 2014. O'Brien Schofield, here's a guy that bounced around, had a little bit of success with the Cardinals, was cut, and then was picked up by Seattle. Got limited playing time there. He's going to get an opportunity to get after the quarterback, which is what I think he excels at in this league. He's going to be a New York Giant. Giants desperately need help at that linebacker position. Looks like O'Brien Schofield is going to get an opportunity to start in New York. Rashard Jennings, he was snatched away from the Raiders, going to sign a contract with these Giants, a running back that is going to upgrade that position for the Giants. Giants had trouble keeping running backs on the field last season. Rashard Jennings, I thought, had a really impactful year last year for the Oakland Raiders. He's going to be a New York Giant. Jeff Schwartz is a guy at the guard position coming in, is going to look to solidify this offensive line for the Giants that was a mess last season. They've got a lot of work to do to improve this offensive line. Jeff Schwartz, coming in from the Kansas City Chiefs, will look to help solidify this offensive line. You look at a couple of visits, Peyton Hillis also back with the Giants. He signed a deal. He'll be back with the Giants. And a visit for the Giants, Tracy Porter, the corner from the Raiders, is a guy that they would love to have come in and shore up their cornerback situation. Giants really could use some help out wide at the cornerback position, and Tracy Porter can also come down into the nickel and play over the slot. So he's a valuable piece. If the Giants could get him, probably would be a huge signing for them. You look at the Denver Broncos, TJ Ward, 4 years, $23 million. Huge signing for the Denver Broncos. That immediately elevates the level of play in their safety position and in their secondary, which is desperately needed. This was a Broncos team that struggled against the pass a season ago. Don't really need to explain that to you. You saw what happened to them in the Super Bowl. So they can definitely use upgrades in that secondary. TJ Ward is going to deliver that for them. 4 years, $23 million. So you're talking about just a shade over $5 million per. You look at Andre Caldwell, a.k.a. Bubba Caldwell, 2 years, $3.5 million. He'll be back to help bolster that wide receiving course in Denver. Aqib Talib, big fish out at the cornerback market, lands the biggest deal in free agency this year for the cornerbacks. 6 years, $57 million. So you're talking about $9 million per, a little bit over that, close to that $10 million threshold. And here's a guy that they are looking for him to be the future at the cornerback position, take over that Champ Bailey role. And again, we know Champ Bailey hasn't been the Champ Bailey of old for the last 3 or 4 seasons, but he's going to come in, man up that number 1 corner spot, which is going to allow them to slide Chris Harris over to that 2 spot. And they're hoping that he's healthy off that ACL injury. Huge signing for the Denver Broncos. You also look at a visit that they got, and this is a huge one. DeMarcus Ware was cut by the Cowboys. We'll talk about that a little bit later. He is scheduled to visit the Denver Broncos here in the next coming days. That could be a huge get. If they can find a way to lock him down, and reports are they do not want to let him out of their facility without him signing a deal. If they can sign DeMarcus Ware to a contract, that could do wonders for this Denver Broncos football team. We move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Chad Henne signed before free agency, 2 years, $8 million. He'll be back as a Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback. Will Blackmon is back with this team as well. Great signing. I talked about that in the preview video for free agency for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Thought that was the guy they needed to have back. They got their man back. Zane Beadles, 5 years, $30 million. You're talking about 6 per guard coming over from the Denver Broncos. Here's a reliable guard, doesn't miss time, and is a guy that is a serious pass protector, will protect the quarterback, and I think that's a huge get for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He immediately upgrades that guard position on their football team. Toby Gerhart, 3 years, $10.5 million. He's probably going to start, folks, for this Jacksonville Jaguars football team. And it was funny because one of the analysts on NFL Network said, hey, Toby Gerhart probably can start in 2014. Well, he's going to get an opportunity, it looks like, depending on what the Jacksonville Jaguars do in free agency and in draft. He's got an opportunity to man up the starting position at running back for this Jaguars team. And I like the move. Toby Gerhart, versatile, can catch it, can run the football, tough in between the tackles. He's going to be a running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Red Bryant, this happened before free agency, 4 years, $17 million, reunited with his ex-coach, Gus Bradley, in Jacksonville. So you move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get a nice pickup for safety in Mike Mitchell, 5 years, $25 million, coming over from Carolina, had a career year in 2013. He's a guy that is physical, can make plays on the football, huge pickup. He fits what a Pittsburgh Steeler is. He's physical, he's nasty, he's aggressive, he fits a Steeler, and he's going to be a Steeler for the next few years. Ike Taylor restructured his deal and is probably going to finish up his career as a Steeler. The 12-year pro signed a 1-year deal, restructured it. He was due to make $7 million, brought that number down to about 2.5. So it's a cost-friendly deal for him and the Steelers. He's going to be around for at least 1 more year. Look at the Cleveland Browns. They were extremely busy in day one as well. Dante Whitner, 4 years, $28 million. We're talking 7 per at the safety position. Homegrown product from the Ohio area, went to Ohio State, if you remember, for college. And so he's going to come in and replace T.J. Ward. Ward out in Denver now. He's going to come in, fill that void. You look at Carlos Dansby, 4 years, $24 million. A lot of money for a guy that is 32 years old, but he played well last year, made himself some money. Let's see if he's able to live up to his contract. He's going to come in and provide some veteran presence. He's going to take the place of ex-Browns linebacker DeQuell Jackson. So they're replacing a veteran with a veteran. You look at Andrew Hawkins. He's not officially a Cleveland Brown yet, but he has an offer sheet in front of him that the Browns expect him to sign. It is 3 times the amount that the Cincinnati Bengals tendered him at. So the Browns will be in the driver's seat if he signs this offer sheet. The Cincinnati Bengals would then have 5 days to match. But if I'm hearing the reports correctly, the Cincinnati Bengals have no intentions of matching that deal if it is in fact 3 times as much as they have him tendered at. And so Andrew Hawkins could be the answer to the slot issues for this Cleveland Browns football team if they can get him away from intrastate rival and division rival Cincinnati. Look at the Minnesota Vikings. Matt Castle signed before free agency, 2 years, $10 million. So he'll be back in the fold. I talked about that on the preview video for free agency for the Vikings. He needed to be back. He's back. You look at Linval Joseph. This is a huge get for this Minnesota Vikings team. Kevin Williams is a free agent. He's not going to be back. They drafted a young guy out of Florida last year in the first round, Sharif Floyd. You put Linval Joseph next to him, you've got a pretty good tandem for years to come if Sharif Floyd can play up to the level that they believe he can. 5 years, $31.5 million. That's some good money for Linval Joseph, a really good football player coming over from the New York Football Giants. He's going to help this Vikings football team try to get back on track defensively. You look at Everson Griffin, 5 years, $42 million. One of the surprise signings of the offseason thus far. He was re-signed by this Vikings team, but the money that he received, a lot of people aren't too enamored with the contract that he was able to receive. But I'm all about players getting their money. Everson Griffin got his money. We're talking about over $8 million per year. Oakland Raiders, the Oakland Raiders. We're going to talk about the Raiders a little bit later, but Roger Saffold, 5 years, $42.5 million. So we're talking well over $8 million for a guy that has some injury issues, some question marks there. Is a versatile player, though, can play left or right tackle and guard. Probably more suited to play guard, but with the money the Raiders are playing him, you got to expect them to try to make this guy work at possibly one of the tackle positions, but he could be playing guard for the Raiders. You look at Darren McFadden. This was a surprise. 1 year, $4 million deal to come back to Oakland. Nobody expected Darren McFadden to come back. Run DMC looked like he was done in Oakland. Looks like he'll be back donning the silver and black for one more season. And Austin Howard, late in the first day of free agency, signs a 5-year, $30 million deal. Right tackle from the New York Jets is going to come over and help try to bolster this Oakland Raiders offensive line. So Raiders looking to do some damage up front on this offensive line and get that situation squared away. So you move on to the Tennessee Titans. Big signing for them. Dexter McCluster, 3 years, $12 million deal. Gives them versatility. And I think that spells trouble for Chris Johnson, because if you look at Dexter McCluster, he's a guy that has speed, very quick, can give you some value on punt returns. And he's a guy that is very versatile in the backfield, can run it, can catch it. You can put him out wide as a receiver. You can put him in the backfield. And I don't know what their plans are for him. If they want him to be a receiver, if they want him to be sort of a third down back, I don't know what the usage is going to be for him in this offense on this football team. But if they have plans of using him as a back, that could be the last straw for Chris Johnson in Tennessee. Leon Washington also back on this football team. So they're adding backs. Not a good sign for Chris Johnson being back on this football team. And Rapati Patuatua, 3 years, $10 million. This was prior to free agency, so he'll be back. The big 6'8" defensive end / defensive tackle will be back in Tennessee. So you move on to the San Francisco 49ers. Antoine Bethea, 4 years, $23 million. Remember, their safety for the last 3 or 4 seasons is now in Cleveland in Dante Whitner, so they had to replace him, had a void at safety. They fill it with Antoine Bethea, the Colt safety, and he's been in Indianapolis for a long time. He comes over, brings an aggressive style of football. I think it's a natural fit in San Francisco. Great move going out and getting a seasoned veteran like Antoine Bethea. Blaine Gabbert was acquired for a 6th round pick. This was a trade that many of us did not see coming, especially a guy like Blaine Gabbert, who his stock in this league is really low. And so thought he was probably going to be released by the Jaguars at some point. If the 49ers really coveted him that much, they could have waited, I thought, but they decided to shell out a 6th round draft pick. He's now a San Francisco 49er, and I think that spells the end of the line in San Francisco for Colt McCoy. We'll see. So, also, the 49ers stayed active, trading for Jonathan Martin, the beleaguered tackle out of Miami. We know about the whole situation with the harassment in Miami. We knew he wasn't going back there. The Dolphins had planned to trade him all along after the situation happened. They found a suitor in San Francisco. It makes a lot of sense. Martin being from that Bay Area, he went to Stanford, wanted to go back out to the West Coast. So he hits San Francisco and he reunites with his college coach in Jim Harbaugh. So he's going to get an opportunity to make that roster. They traded him for an undisclosed pick, but it's most likely going to be a conditional pick where if he makes the roster and reaches a certain amount of snaps or starts or makes the roster, then they'll receive a 6th or a 7th round pick. So not a lot to give up to get a guy that could potentially start for you in this league. Again, they're not looking for him to start in San Francisco. He'll be a guy that if somebody goes down along that offensive line at the tackle position, especially right tackle, if Joe Staley goes down, he'll be able to step in and help the 49ers. So when you move on to the New Orleans Saints, Jarius Byrd, a big fish, one of the biggest fish in the pond that is NFL free agency. 6 years, $56 million, and reports came out that he was looking for $9 million per. He was able to land that in New Orleans. Bills offered him 8. He wanted 9. There was a $1 million difference. He got his money in free agency from the New Orleans Saints. And you ask yourself, Saints started purging the roster, and you're thinking all of that was in the name of re-signing Jimmy Graham, their tight end. But they go out and spend a buku amount of money on Jarius Byrd, not saying that he's not worth it. That's a lot of cash. But you got to keep Darren Sproles, in my opinion. If you're going to go out and make some moves, fine. If you want to get rid of Lance Moore, cool. You want to get rid of Pierre Thomas, I don't have a problem with that. But you got to keep Darren Sproles, in my estimation. But they went out, they spent the money, and they see it as money well spent to pair him up with Kenny Vaccaro, their first-round pick out of Texas from last season. That could be a match made in heaven. And so they got themselves a playmaker on the defensive side of football in Jarius Byrd. Spent a lot of money to do it, but you knew if you were going to land Jarius Byrd, anybody in free agency that had their eye on Jarius Byrd, you were going to have to come up off that dirty green cream. And so it seems like he was able to get what he was looking for in New Orleans. He's going to be a Saint. You move on to the Seattle Seahawks. Anthony McCoy signs back with the football team, tight end, athletic, out of USC, back with the team. Michael Bennett is back with the Seattle Seahawks. This was prior to free agency. He signed a deal. He'll be back in Seattle. Doug Baldwin also going to be back with this football team. You look at a couple of guys that have some visits lined up in Seattle. Jermichael Finley, off of that spinal fusion surgery, has been cleared by the doctors. He's looking for work. If he checks out in the physical, likes what he hears in Seattle, they like what they hear from him and the doctors, he could be and that could be a huge pickup for a team that lacks that lacks athleticism at that tight end position. No, they got the young kid out of Rice, but he's not Jermichael Finley. That could be a huge pickup for the Seattle Seahawks. The rich could be getting richer in Seattle. And Jason Hatcher, and we're talking about a guy that got 11 or 10 and a half sacks from the defensive tackle position in Dallas a season ago, was the lone bright spot in Dallas. If they can get their hands on him and replace a guy like Clinton McDonald that ended up in Tampa, that could be a huge move. We know how dominant the Seattle Seahawks are on defense, especially up front on that defensive line. They can add a guy like Jason Hatcher that is a menace inside at the defensive tackle position. That could be a huge boost to this Seattle Seahawks defense that is already the best in the National Football League. So look out for Seattle. They're quietly trying to make some power moves in free agency. You look at the Arizona Cardinals. They made a big splash, signing left tackle Jared Veldheer to a 5-year, $37.5 million deal, snatching him away from the Raiders. Huge pickup. This is a team that has been looking for left tackle help for about 2 or 3 years since Levi Brown got injured that one season. They've been struggling at left tackle. He's going to upgrade that position immensely and give them credibility along that offensive line. So Cardinals slowly putting the pieces together on this offensive line. And so that's a huge move for them. They also signed Jake Ballard, Jay Feely, and Frosty Rucker back to their team. All guys were on this roster a season ago, going to be back to this Arizona Cardinals roster. And also John Carlson, this was before free agency, signed a 2-year, $5 million deal to join the Arizona Cardinals. So Cardinals extremely active in the first day of free agency. Green Bay Packers signed up Sam Shields, 4 years, $39 million. This was prior to free agency taking place. So he's going to be back in the mix for the Green Bay Packers. You look at the San Diego Chargers. Donald Brown signs a 3-year deal. Terms of the deal undisclosed at this time, but he's going to travel out to San Diego to try to help bolster their rushing attack. Good move by the Chargers, because I think a guy like Ronnie Brown is done in San Diego. He's going to upgrade that running back position, is Donald Brown. Chad Reinhardt going to be back in San Diego, the guard. They re-signed him. He'll be back in San Diego. You look at the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Williams signed back to this team prior to free agency. 4 years, $26 million with a young man out of Texas. Made the transition from corner to safety and has done it flawlessly. He's a playmaker back there. Bills didn't want to see him test free agency. Went ahead and re-upped that guy. He's going to be around for years to come. So that's free agency essentially in day number 1. Situations are fluid. Money is fluid. All of these deals, some of the numbers could be a little off. Again, a lot of these deals are fluid. So this is what I had, and this is what I saw prior to me calling it a night. And so I burned the midnight oil on this one. We move on to a couple of other issues before we get out of here. These were some of the releases in the first day of free agency. Kyle Cook, center out of Cincinnati, was released. Thomas Deku, a huge safety release out of Atlanta. That's a guy to keep your eye on. If you're a team in need of safety help, he's a guy that can come in and upgrade your safety position. Lamar Woodley, Steelers, he's set to be a June 1st release, so he's pretty much out of Pittsburgh at this point. Darren College, I talked about this on the Arizona Cardinals preview for free agency, that he was going to be released. Huge cap number, makes a lot of sense. He's out in Arizona. Julius Peppers, saw this one coming. Writing was on the wall, and the Lamar Houston signing pretty much spelled the end of the line for Julius Peppers in Chicago. The veteran was released. He's on the market. He's going to command some attention eventually in free agency. The biggest release of the day came out of Big D. DeMarcus Ware, no longer a Dallas Cowboy. They had been struggling over the money and him needing to restructure his deal, give some of the money back. DeMarcus Ware wasn't really on board with that. He told the Cowboys, hey, I need a decision on what you're going to do with me by free agency. Cowboys elected to cut him loose. The 7-time Pro Bowler is now on the free agent market for the first time in his career. And you know he's going to be a highly sought after commodity. I've already told you he's on his way to Denver. So stay tuned, as DeMarcus Ware is a guy that is going to come off this free agent market very quickly. You look at Owen Daniels, tight end, long time in Houston, gone. And it makes plenty of sense. I talked about them liking Ryan Griffin, talked about them wanting to bring Garrett Graham back in free agency. All of those guys to me do the same thing. You don't need all 3 of them. 2 out of the 3 would do just fine. And so Owen Daniels, with his huge cap number, is the odd man out in Houston. Bryce McCain also let go in Houston. The cornerback is no longer a Houston Texan. Kevin Corn on the Cobb. That'll probably be the last time I get to say that. He's out in Buffalo. Concussion-riddled career probably coming to an end with his release in Buffalo. Carlos Rogers, cut loose from the San Francisco 49ers, going to save them some money under the cap. Miles Austin is set to be a June 1 release in Dallas. He's essentially out as a Cowboy. Santonio Holmes out as a Jet. So is Antonio Cromartie. And Justin Forsett gone from the Jacksonville Jaguars roster. So now we finish up potential trades in day 1. Some of the noise that was going on around free agency. Darren Sproles, it was reported that there's at least 10 potential suitors for his services as trading partners. in New Orleans. So looks like he's not going to be released after all. He's going to be traded to some team that is going to compensate the New Orleans Saints. Look at Steve Smith in Carolina. It's funny because I talked to a lot of Panthers fans and they were up in arms about the thought of Steve Smith not remaining on this roster. Well, he's not going to be on this roster. He's either going to be released or traded. And one team that is definitely interested is the Baltimore Ravens. They're hovering around that situation very closely and waiting. And essentially, they're hovering around like vultures, like the Ravens that they are. They're waiting. And when they decide to cut him loose, they'll be there to swoop in and snatch up Steve Smith. And so, looks like Steve Smith is on his way out in Carolina. Darrelle Revis, in the heart of day one of free agency, looked like there were two trading partners lined up for the services of Darrelle Revis, one in Cleveland, one in Oakland. Both of those teams fell through, decided, hey, he's too rich for our blood. If he doesn't work out in New England, he's currently on his way to New England to meet with the Patriots brass. If his number and the Patriots number don't line up, they can't agree, the Buccaneers are not going to have any choice but to cut him loose. Then he will be a free agent, and then let the bidding war begin for the services of Darrelle Revis. And last but not least, CJ, formerly 2K, is probably on the skids in Tennessee. I talked about two guys that could be in the mix. Leon Washington, Dexter McCluster, going to be Tennessee Titans. I don't know what those moves mean for Chris Johnson, but it doesn't seem like the Titans are going to have him back. He's dangling out there right now on the trading block. I expect Chris Johnson to be on the move at some point, whether it's draft day or sometime in free agency. I expect him to be on the move in Tennessee. And so that's going to do it for day one of the NFL free agency period, aka the market. Keep in mind, all sales are final. Check your merchandise because you can't return it. No refunds, no exchanges, no returns. Check your stuff before you check it out at the market. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. I thank you for joining me on this program. I'll be back tomorrow to break down day two of the market. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.
In the L.A.B. room.